Hello and welcome to this special American edition of Trash to Track. Now, Pete over at Delph Junction, who's a mate of mine, has sent me 3 American engines. This one is dead completely apparently, and this is a Dash 8, Atlas Master Dash 8 Loco. But what they also did, Pete and his wife Sue, they also sent me some biscuits. So anybody else sending repairs, if you want to include a packet of biscuits, that's always that'll always be welcome. But anyway, let's have a look at this. Now, I've decided to do 3 Locos in one video because they're all American. And this is an Amtrak Dash 8, I believe. And it's in dodgy condition. The body shell's loose, as you can see there, and it is absolutely filthy. The wheels are caked in dirt, and there's something splashed all over the body shell. I don't know if it's tea or Coca-Cola or something along those lines. But you can see it on the top there. There is something all over this engine, and they are in absolutely filthy condition. And should not have in any way been sold at an exhibition as running locos. As you'll see, all 3 of these engines I deal with in this episode, all 3 have problems, 2 more so than others. But just giving that body shell a rub with a dry cotton bud, and you can see the amount of dirt coming off it and how much difference that's made. So I'm going to have to give that a clean later. Now, trying to run it with a battery, there's absolutely no movement or any signs of life at all. So what Pete said is correct. This is completely dead. So I'm going to have to look at getting the body off. Now, to remove the body properly, you have to remove the Buckeye coupling boxes at each end. And apologies, but that's just off camera. And the Buckeyes on this model are in 2 halves, and one of the halves was missing off the front. There's only half a Buckeye on the front, and I didn't know where the other one was. But when I took the body shell off, it was actually inside the body shell, trapped inside the cab. So at least we found that and repaired that. But you remove these screws and take all the coupling gubbins out, and then the body shell will lift off. Now, I'm not familiar with American engines. These are the first ones I've actually looked at diesel-wise. I've done a couple of steam engines. And I have done one other Santa Fe diesel, but these are very different. Now, the body shell was quite stiff to get off, but when I removed it, it eventually came off. It's got one of the weirdest setups I think I've ever seen inside a model Loco. That orange or yellow PCB you can see there is actually, it doubles up as an analog PCB, and it's actually a DCC decoder as well. And I've never seen that before. So I'm just looking there, that wire looks to be loose going towards the motor. So I'm going to have a look and see if we can apply power directly to the motor and see if it will work. But I'm going to disconnect the wires first so that I don't blow anything on the circuit board. And I'm just going to mark that with a red pen so you at home can see when it spins. Now, just put in power direct to the motor terminals. The motor is spinning. So the motor's okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to solder these wires to the tabs because the little black plastic inserts were not holding them in place properly. So I'm going to solder the wires back onto this, although you will see in a minute it is fruitless. Now, what you do with this model is it's got an analog and DCC socket, so you switch the blanking plate around to whatever you want it to run on. And following the instructions, that's what I did. But the model wouldn't run on DCC either. My Gauge Master Prodigy system wouldn't even read this as a decoder. So I'm not sure how old this is. And after consulting a couple of friends who repair trains in America, they told me to remove it. I did get it going eventually. It is moving, but in one direction it is better than the other. And you'll see in a minute that there is a problem. So I put it in the cradle for a start, and I'm going to clean the wheels because the wheels are absolutely caked in dirt. How this could have been sold as a running engine is beyond me, and it makes me angry that people at exhibitions think they can get away with this sort of thing. Unfortunately, Pete never told me the seller, otherwise I would have named and shamed on this video because these models were particularly bad. But you can see there with the cotton bud and methylated spirits just how dirty these wheels are. I then polished them up with a fiberglass pencil to remove the real stubborn dirt, but it still wasn't running properly. In one direction it was extremely lumpy, stop, start, stop, start, even though the switch was in the analog position on the left hand side. Now running it here, this is running backwards. You can see the lights lighting up and it's steady. It's running okay. And if I touch that PCB stroke decoder thing in the middle there, it's cool to the touch. No problems at all. However, if I reverse polarity and get it to go forwards, you'll see on the extreme left the light is flashing like there's a power drain or something, and then when I put my finger on that PCB again, it is too hot to touch. It is absolutely scalding, and there was some white smoke being emitted. Now, like I said, I contacted people that I know on YouTube that repair Athen models and that, and they said that this is a known fault. This is old technology. So hardwire a decoder in it if you can. But Pete is DC. So I'm going to rip all this electrical gubbins out and wire it up for DC running, which is what I've done here. Now, it may look a little bit messy with that insulation tape, but I will tidy that up in a moment. But as soon as I'd removed that PCB stroke decoder and fixed the bulbs down, it ran a treat. Now, removing the screw in the die-cast weight there allowed me access to the gearbox covers. Pretty much like a Bachmann model, unclip the big gearbox covers will allow me access to the worm gear. When I got inside here, the worm gear had that familiar green hued grease on it that Hornby used that solidifies, so I cleaned all that off. I'm just lifting the, sorry my fingers are in the way, but I'm just lifting the worm gear out here, just so I can get into the gearbox. And once I'd cleaned it with a cotton bud and mess, I apply some fresh grease with this Woodland Scenics PTFE grease. And then I put the worm gear back in. Now, this has been cleaned. I gave that a spray with the WD-40 contact cleaner to remove that old grease. But once that's all cleaned and evaporated, put the worm gear back in. Give it the flywheels a turn by hand to spread the grease. And then I'm adding some fresh oil onto the bearings so that this won't seize up, and it'll be in tip-top condition when I give it back to Pete. Now, if you haven't seen Pete's channel, give a YouTube search for Delph Junction. Pete's a lovely guy, as is his wife Sue. I see them a lot at exhibitions. They're very local to me, and they are genuinely nice people. In fact, Pete's made quite a donation of surplus locos to the channel, which will feature in a video coming up soon in the next week or two. But anyway, I've now finished lubricating that, and I clip the gearbox cover back on and then put the die-cast weight back in place and then screw it back down. I've also glued the front door back in place because that had come loose and the spring mechanism on the inside was damaged, so that's been glued in and it makes it look a lot better. The front handrails were missing, but there's nothing I could do about that. And then the body shell was placed back on the chassis. I'd also repaired the rear of the body shell. As you saw at the start, it was loose, so I've glued that back into place because 3 of the plastic clips had broke, so it required gluing. And once the chassis is back in place, it was a very, very tight fit, as all 3 models were. The chassis were very, very tight. It was time to put the couplings back on. Now, like I said, the Buckeyes on this were dual. There were 2 pieces to make up 1 coupling. So you had to make sure you got the right pieces. And then these slot through the front onto that little notch. And then the top part was put on. I'm just using something to support it there because I had another engine in the cradle at this time. But the top was put back on, the screw was replaced. And the screw holds the couplings in place and also the body shell onto the chassis, which is quite a neat idea. Only 2 screws. It's very simple to take the body off. It's just putting the couplings back on that can be a bit of a pain in the backside. But I'm just checking there to make sure the coupling's working, and it is. And that's this Dash 8 virtually rebuilt. Now, these handrails on the side were glued back into position, and the whole thing was cleaned with a cotton bud and some warm soapy water. Not fairy liquid, it was hand soap. The driver in the cab is sitting rather high. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But now when I give it a battery test, you can see that it's a lovely, strong, powerful runner in both directions. And the Amtrak livery looks really smart, if I'm honest. My knowledge on American diesels is pretty slim, but this looks to be a nice looking, and now it's a nice running locomotive. So it was a first for me. I've never worked on an engine where the PCB inside of it also doubles up as a DCC decoder. Although, as I said, my gauge master system wouldn't read it. And these two bits in the middle here have obviously failed because when it was running in forwards, it was so hot and it was emitting white smoke. But we've repaired it now and it's running and Pete's happy with it. So we'll have a look at his next loco, which was this, and this is in an awesome colour scheme. This is a Union Pacific SD40, I think, -2, I think this is. If I'm wrong, I apologise. But this is in Desert Storm livery, and I think it looks absolutely awesome in this camo livery. Now, this model is also got a post-it with it, and Peter said this one tries to work on full power. Just tries. It's obviously not very good. So I'm going to give this a test with a battery as well to see what's going on with this one. And with a battery test, there's nothing again. This was dead. And again, this was sold as a running engine at an exhibition. And it is absolutely deplorable that somebody would rip people off for £50 an engine for dead locos. So starting off as I did with the previous model, I removed the coupling boxes and the screws therewith. And think, oh, that's all right, the body shell will then just lift off. Well, how wrong I was. The body shell was absolutely solid to the chassis, and I was looking round thinking there's a secret screw or something, but there isn't. I again messaged a friend of mine who repairs in America, and he said the body shell should just lift off. This is an Athen model, should be very, very simple. But before I do that, again, I just want to show you how filthy this model is. A cotton bud and some hand soap in warm water, and look at that. That is absolutely filthy, and the whole body shell is dirty. Now I can't just wash this with a toothbrush because of the delicate handrail, so I'm going to have to clean the whole body with cotton buds and warm soapy water. Now I must have farted around with this for a good 20 minutes, half hour trying to get this body shell off here. And it just would not budge. It was almost like it had been glued on. I tried removing these coupling boxes, which didn't make any difference. I pushed them all out. Then the top part came off. It came unclipped, revealing a load of wiring and another ancient decoder. But the body shell finally came off by pushing from the inside. And it's because they'd used sticky pads to hold the motor in place inside the body shell. Now opening this up again, this is a very old decoder. This would read on my gauge master system, but it wouldn't run it. I believe it's a very old TCS one. So I'm going to snip all the wires because again, Pete is DC. So I'm going to wire this up for DC running. And that bird's nest of wires can be taken away. I do keep the bulbs because I wire them back in and get them running. But that's going to go in the bin because I don't think it's any good. And there you go. There's a lot of rust in this model. This model has obviously been stored somewhere where it is very damp. You can see on the bogie towers how much rust there is in it, and there's just a lot of dirt. And this model has been apart many times in the past. Now I know that because the motor mounts are heavily worn, and in fact one of the motor mounts was loose. Now you can see here just how much rust is on those bogie mounts where the solder joints are. So I'm going to have to strip this down and completely clean this up. Now this model, if I'd have been sent this one, this would have made a video just on its own. But I've removed the motor now. This was easy, it just lifted out. And you can see just how much dirt and rust is in this model. And like I said, this was sold as a runner. It's ridiculous really that they can do that. But everything was cleaned. The motor, the flywheels, the chassis was all thoroughly cleaned up. The motor is a nice, strong, powerful runner, although it isn't very quick at top speed, I'm going to admit. And that's evident later when it hauls a train. Its top line speed isn't very high. But then I understand that these models, or these locos in real life, are not exactly speed demons because they're designed for hauling heavy trains as opposed to racing round on crack expresses. So I'm going to undo the, whoops, that flicked off there, but it only landed just off camera. But I'll flick off the gearbox covers to relieve the bogie towers. And you can see the corrosion on there. This has either been stored in a very damp shed or it's been wet at some point in its life. So to remove all this rust, I'm going to desolder the wires, which I have already done. Then using a brass brush and my Dremel, I'm going to polish all these up to remove all this corrosion. If you ever do this, use safety glasses, because these little brass bristles do have a tendency to fly off. And the last thing you want to do is get one of those in your eye. But I work around as best I can and clean all the surface rust off these parts. I go in there and clean the insides as well. And then I'll polish them up properly, ready to resolder new wires onto them. So there we go, just polishing all that up like that. I also use the wire brush, or the brass brush, to clean the corrosion off the side of the motor. There's quite a bit of corrosion on the top there and on the side, so I'll just polish it all off and make sure everything's nice and clean. And you can see on the right hand side there the bogey tower that's already been cleaned. Now this type of motor has got an open commutator, so I'm going to clean the commutator with a cotton bud and some WD-40 contact cleaner. I'm going to clean the commutator thoroughly, and then using a toothpick, which I shave the end down into a wedge shape, I'm going to clean the gaps out in the commutator. Now these were really deep on this model, and there was quite a bit of carbon build-up in them, so it all needed a proper clean and service. And it is a 5-pole motor. It's a very good motor, to be honest. It's got a lot of torque. And then the commutator was polished up, and that's removed all that dirt. So it should help it run a bit better. Now I also added a small amount of oil to the motor bearings on that. And now I'm going to put these motor mounts back on and see if we can use these, because I can't readily get spares in the UK for this model. So they push on, and those 4 lugs sticking up push through the holes in the chassis and hold the motor in place. Now when I took this apart, 2 of these were loose, which allowed the motor to be lifted out when I took the body off. I'm also adding some insulation tape there because it's a metal chassis and I don't want to cause any short circuits. You can see there that the bogey towers are now all cleaned and they've had fresh wire soldered to them. So this model has had a thorough rewire. And I'm now trying to push and manipulate those lugs through the holes in the die-cast chassis, which it does eventually go through. But I do spend some time making sure that all 4 lugs are in correctly. Now that all 4 lugs are in, I've cleaned all these bearings and worm gear up, sprayed them with WD-40 contact cleaner to remove the congealed oil and grease, and now they're ready for refitting onto the model. So I'm going to put this bogey tower on, thread the wires through. You can see on the bottom there just how much wear this has had as it's worn through to the metal. And that'll sit there like that. Now I'm going to put the worm gear and drive shafts back in. Drive shafts on this model fit, they've got hexagonal fit in the flywheel, so you have to line that up correctly. And once it's in, the bearings fit in the holes on top of the gearbox. The same was done for the other side. Then some fresh PTFE grease was put in along with some oil on those bearings, and then the gearbox covers were replaced. And we're getting there now with the second engine. Small amount of oil on those bearings, as I said. Now a small amount of this Woodland Scenics PTFE, I believe it is, model grease. It's the white stuff you get. I didn't use the Bell 106 because that was in the other toolbox. So the gearbox covers just snap back into place very gently so you don't break them. The bulbs were wired indirect to the pickups because on my research, American engines have lights on both ends when they're running. So I'm going to wire all this up, tidy it up, and then we'll be able to put the body shell back on. So I've wired this all up now. The bulb in the top there is held in place with black tack so that it's in line with the light lenses. Making sure the flywheels turn freely, the body shell was then put back on. And this was very gently pushed down, and it was a lot easier to put on after I'd removed that old sticky pad and all that corrosion off the motor. And there we go, it's holding in place nicely. So as I mentioned earlier, this model was absolutely filthy. It's obviously been in some workshop or shed. The amount of dirt on this model and the rust on the inside proves that it's been stored outside, and for quite some time, I'd imagine, as well. But you can see how dirty the cotton buds get in there, and this is just the top and the cab roof. And it really did make a difference. That khaki colour did come up quite nice once it was clean. But you have to work carefully and methodically so as not to ruin any of the handrails, because these models are delicate on the top here. Clean the name boards, clean the sides. And I must have gone through about 40 cotton buds cleaning all 3 engines. And then a battery test. Well, no, actually this is tested with a controller, but you can see there how nice and strong and running it is. And it's now back to full working order for Pete. So as I said, I do like this livery, this Desert Storm livery on this. And it's good that the American railroad companies do this for their veterans. Even the bogies are painted in camo, and there's USA there. And there's a list of people there, veterans. I believe there'd be veterans, wouldn't they? Names of people that have probably perished in the horrors of war, unfortunately. But I think this engine's a very nice tribute to those guys. I'm just going to level that name board up. So that's 2 out of 3. So the next one we're going to look at is this little S3 switcher. Now, out of all 3 engines, this has to be my favourite one. And Pete said that this one works on full power but very slowly. And it should have a light on it. And he, again, paid 50 quid for this model. Now, I do like this. This reminds me of a Class 20. And if I came across one of these, I would gladly use it on my railway. But I'd anglicise it a bit and put buffers on it like the Port Talbot engines. What is immediately apparent again, as the previous 2 engines, the wheels are absolutely filthy, and as is the body shell. This one has got a thick coat of dirt on the wheels and a thick coat of dust. You can see the dust on the black livery. If I get that cotton bud and water again, just to clean it all over. Again, an absolutely filthy model. Sold as a running Loco, but it's not up to standard. Whoever sold this, if you're watching, you should be ashamed of yourself. So I'm going to put this on the track and give it a battery test. And this model, the first out of all 3, this one actually does work, but very sluggishly. So I'm going to have a look, because I've got a funny feeling this may have a decoder in it as well. Now, some decoders, as you'll know from watching the channel, are not compatible with DC running. So I'm going to remove it and see if that improves things. Now, to remove the body shell on this, you need to remove the 2 screws in the fuel tanks, and you also need to remove the 2 screws that go through the coupling boxes on either end. So out of the 3 engines, this is the smallest, yet it's the most secure in way of securing the body shell on. Initially I thought just removing those 2 screws would be enough, but it wasn't. I had to take the coupling boxes off as well. So when those have been removed, the body shell will pull away very gently. And it's another centrally mounted motor job with gearboxes. And as I assumed, quite an old Digitrax decoder is fitted to this model, as you'll see when I can wiggle that body shell off. Again, another very tight shell to chassis relationship. And there we go. There's the decoder hidden under that old red insulation tape. It's still refusing to give up easily. There's nothing there. There we go. But yeah, so another old decoder, and you can tell how old it is because the insulation tape's actually gone brittle and it just falls away when I try and take it off. I took it off from this end. There's no stick left to it. Look, it's just garbage. So this has actually got a blanking plate in it. This is a properly DCC ready model. So I'm going to remove the old decoder. Now this decoder did read on my Gauge Master system again, but it proved to be very sluggish. So I'm going to fit a blanking plate and see how we go from there. And I'm going to put that socket back in place with a bit of black tack. And now when I test it with a battery, the lights are working, which they weren't before. And it's actually a nice runner. Now I did some research on these engines and they're not the fastest in the world. And this is geared accordingly. These are like switching shunting locos, so they're not going to be the fastest. Now, it was very, very dry. There was no lubrication in this model whatsoever. So I'm adding some oil down there, some gear oil onto the worm gears. I let that run in a little while by putting it on the battery, and you can see the motor spinning away. And then once that's spread through the drivetrain, I'm going to add some more of that Woodland Scenics grease so that the drivetrain is correctly lubricated and will give many years of service. Then it was appended into the cradle and the wheels cleaned. Now all three of these models had the same pickup system. You can see the bars in the bogie there, so the wheels pick up and transfer power to the pickup bars in the bogie. And once the wheels are clean, it proves to be a very, very reliable method of picking up power. Much like the Hornby Class 31s and 50s. It's the same sort of setup. Now you can see on that cotton bud just how dirty those two wheels are. So once I've cleaned them all up with a cotton bud and meths, you can see those wheels there have a bronzy finish to them, but the rest are silver. So I'm not sure why that is. But I put the body shell back on, and that was a very, very simple repair. It was just a case of cleaning the wheels, re-lubricating and fitting a blanking plate, and this little switcher is now back in running order. Although again, I need to clean all the running boards and the body shell because it's absolutely caked in dirt. And I do like this. I'm going to keep my eye out for one of these for myself, I think, because I do like this little engine. Out of all three, it's my favourite one. And it's got a very, very good, and I'll show you in a second, it's just running back and forwards, but the slow speed creep on this model is absolutely fantastic. If I just stop it there and go closer, now look at that, that's brilliant. That's on like 5%. What an awesome little engine that is, and it's got lights on it. So I am going to keep an eye out for one of them, and maybe anglicise it and run it on the garden railway. So that's the third and final one of Pete's American diesels, all sorted in this USA special. And I'm pleased to have been able to repair these for Pete, because he was a little bit despondent that he'd bought these at shows and felt like he'd been ripped off. And I'm not surprised, to be honest. They were in no way... The first two, this Amtrak and the Desert Storm one especially, were in no way running engines to be sold to the public. But all three are now done, and all three are on the workbench ready to be reunited with Pete. So I messaged him and we met up at Trains for You, and I gave them a run on their layout with Pete present so he could see them all running. And I also donated to Pete a load of American wagons that I had. I've not used these since I did that big boy up, so I've given them to Pete to use on his railway. If you've got an engine or anything you'd like to see featured in a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Have a look and then it's sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. So I want to extend my thanks to Pete and Sue for the biscuits. That was lovely, thank you very much. Also to Trains for You, I must say thanks to them, because I use their shop layout an awful lot for testing. And they're always accommodating, they're always welcoming, so I do thank you guys there. And I'll leave you now some shots of Pete's American diesels running round. I don't haul the stock with the other two Locos because the Buckeyes on the stock are quite old and they didn't handle second radius curves very well. So thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe. Go and check Pete's channel at Delph Junction. Go and give him a subscribe. He's a lovely bloke. He deserves the subscriptions. He's a good mate. And I'll catch you all again in the next video. Bye for now.